Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today I want to react to a recent interview by one of the most intriguing Brazilians I've ever known about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this story, how I became aware of who this guy is and, what he was all about, what he is all about. The name of the video, I asked, what if Jesus was a man of color? And that's when everything hit the fan, says Tony Tornado, one of Brazil's most important soul singers. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible, but this is going to be another of my variety of videos where, okay, I'm going to give you a brief introduction and then I'm going to expand and put it in further context in the longer form video. So with that said, let's get directly into the video because I have a lot of respect for this guy. So I want to talk a little bit about him today. I have various articles at blackbraziltoday.com that talk about Tony Tornado. So let me just get into this video for today. So this was taken from, I don't even know what year this interview is from, but it's an interview with Tony Tornado. He is, people probably know him more as an actor these days, but his importance goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, when in his career as a singer. You could say it was short-lived in terms of how many albums and singles he put out, but it's incredible. This guy is still performing. I'm going to explain why that's incredible in a minute. But this wasn't, I'd say probably in the last 3 to 4 years, this interview came out, if not more. Like I said, I didn't check the date, but when I heard what he said, I'm like, well, this is a topic I've already talked about. So let me talk a little bit about what Tony Tornado had to say. So these are the topics I want to talk about in today's video. Tony Tornado was born Antonio Viana Gomes. He was born in May 26, 1930. So yeah, that makes him 93 years old. In May, he'll be 94. My introduction to Tony Tornado, I always love to tell this story because it's just how it came to me. My first trip to Brazil was Salvador Bahia. I always say Salvador Bahia is Brazil's center of Black culture. Anybody who's into Black cultural things, the diaspora of Black people in the world, you absolutely have to visit Salvador Bahia one day. They call it Black Rome. It is Brazil's center of Black culture. So in September of 2000, I spent my first 3 weeks in Brazil, and it was in Salvador Bahia. I was doing everything I could. I was meeting people. I was talking to people. I was going to places I needed to see as a tourist. I was hanging out. I was buying books, magazines, and I started buying all types of albums. Okay. I love music from outside of U.S. borders. It's intriguing. Anybody who just loves music, to a certain point, you have to start discovering music outside of the borders, outside of the United States. So I started visiting what they call sebos in Brazil. And sebos are like these used magazine, book, album stores. You can find a lot of good stuff in some of the sebos. I've been to them. Wherever I go to a new city or a new state in Brazil that I hadn't been to, I always try to find a sebo because you just find some gems in some of these places. I would go there. I remember it might have been the first or the second trip, actually, come to think of it. I came back with a stack of albums. And I remember, Brazilian, what they call MPB, Brazilian popular music. I bought, bossa nova. I bought samba. I bought Brazilian instrumental music, all types of stuff. And I remember being in one of those record stores. And whenever you go into a sebo, oftentimes they'll have a little miniature record player set up there with earphones so you can listen to the album and see if you want to buy it. And I remember I had about 50 albums that I bought. And when I got to the counter to pay for the albums, the owner of the record store asked me, "Oh, you like Brazilian music? You're você americano, né? Are you an American?" Like, yeah. And well, do you like musica black? Do you like Black music? Like, yeah, of course I like Black music, right? It was a lot of Black Brazilians. I bought music by all types of people. I didn't really care if they were Black or white, even though I did want to know who the Black artists, most important Black artists in Brazil were. I was just buying albums because I had been introduced to Brazilian music. And when you buy Brazilian music in the United States, you'll find an album here, album there. There's a certain handful of artists from Brazil that'll get international attention. But for the most part, if you want to get authentic Brazilian music, and what I mean just the music that Brazilians listen to every day, you have to go to Brazil, right? So I had just all the classic, artists there. I had Chico Buarque, I had Gilberto Gil, I had Milton Nascimento, I had Tim Maia, Os Mutantes, I had I remember Ney Mato Grosso. There was a lot of music I was interested in. I wanted to I was intrigued as why I didn't see so many black artists in the bossa nova movement of the mid to late 50s, right? And so I'm talking to this guy, the owner of the little record store, and he says, "Well, have you ever heard of Tony Tornado?" And I said, "No, who is that?" He was like, "Oh man, you never heard of Tony Tornado? Tony Tornado was like the Brazilian James Brown." I'm like, "Oh, the Brazilian James Brown? I never heard of this guy." He was like, "You need to check him out." He didn't have any albums by Tony Tornado, but ever since I heard the name, I'm like, I got to find out who this guy is. It took me a couple of more years. In this record store that I buy albums from in the United States, albums and CDs, they would get all types of Brazilian stuff in. So I got this compilation CD, and it had music. It was a CD that featured Brazilian artists who were doing a sort of Brazilian soul music. And I'll never forget that CD had some song. Caetano Veloso, one of Brazil's most popular artists. He's not considered a soul artist, but there was a period in, I think, the mid 70s where he was doing his own version of Brazilian soul music. He had a few songs on that CD. There's another guy named Cassiano. He was like, I don't know, he reminds you of something like, I don't know, the Stylistics, maybe one of the Spinners. His music just kind of reminded me of that. He was another Brazilian soul singer. He had a couple songs on that CD. And then I was introduced to this guy named Gerson King Combo. This is another guy, Brazilian black guy, who you could tell the strong James Brown influence in his music and the way that he sung. Then I think later on that year, I happened to find another CD that had a compilation of Brazilian artists on it. And this CD had a song by Tony Tornado on. I'm like, okay, this is the guy that he was talking about. It took me a couple of years to find some music by Tony Tornado, but the song that was on there was a song called Pode Crer Amizade. It came out in 1972. Looks like somebody sampled that song. I got to hear that. Anyway, so this is, it was on a compilation CD. This is not I have this Black Rio. That song is actually on there as well. But it's one of Tony Tornado's biggest hits. Okay. And it was on that CD that I had. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So this is the Tony Tornado that he was telling me about. Right. So I got some of his music. On the next trip that I made to Brazil, I happened to find two of Tony Tornado's albums. One was from 71 and one from 72. And I'm not going to say it's anything on there that's groundbreaking, but when I heard people like Gerson King Combo or Tim Maia or Tony Tornado, I was like, wow, this is what Brazilians, how they interpreted soul music. And those three guys are kind of like the big three of Brazil soul singers. Tim Maia, who's the most popular. Tim Maia died in 1998. Gerson King Combo, I think he died a little bit before I moved back to the US. I think he might have died in 2020, 2021 maybe. And Tony Tornado was still alive and kicking at 93 years old. All of those guys, what they have in common is that they all lived in New York. Tony Tornado actually met Tim Maia in New York. So this was a fascinating story. So I said, I got to know more about this Tony Tornado guy. He says that while he lived in New York, I don't remember him saying how long he lived in New York, but he says while he was there, he worked as a pimp. That's an intriguing story. I mean, they should turn Tony Tornado's story into a movie. There's enough there. It's like, dude, this dude had a really exciting life. In this interview that he did, he's talking about a song that he released where he's questioning, he's asking people like, look, if Jesus Christ was a man of color, would you still love him the way that you love him now? Right. I did a video maybe a couple months ago where a popular Brazilian actress talked about how her father always said God was black. Jesus was black. I don't care what they say. He was a man of color. Right. That's what he's talking about in the interview. That's why I wanted to talk about this today, because it kind of piggybacks on another article that I had done. Black Brazilians, the idea that Black Brazilians should only sing happy samba songs. Now, samba, again, is Brazil's national music. It's kind of kin to American blues or jazz. It's just their historical music that was created by the Black population. But in the 70s, Black Brazilians got introduced to, American soul music. And as I said, those three singers that I just mentioned, they were really responsible for bringing soul music to Brazil, singing in Portuguese. Um, Brazilians were, with the understanding that Brazil was not a racial democracy, a lot of Black Brazilians were gravitating to soul music because there was a lot of protest music and soul music, whereas the samba is like, oh, we're all happy. And the Brazilian elites, particularly this historian anthropologist named Gilberto Freire, he was partially responsible for the idea that Brazil was a racial democracy. And when he heard that hundreds, if not thousands, of Black youth in Rio de Janeiro were coming together for what they called the Bailes Black, the Black dances where they played Black soul music, he was not happy with it. It's like, what is this imported pride of being Black? We're all just Brazilians. Why are you guys trying to dance to this American music? You're going to separate Brazilians. And it was like Brazilian society was already hostile to Black people. If you look at the history, how Brazil has traditionally treated Black people, like, what are you talking about? We're all just one group. You treat Black people, you treat white Brazilians one way, you treat Black Brazilians another way. So Black Brazilians, a lot of them they were frustrated with just being able to sing happy samba songs. I talked about this in several videos, actually, where I says that Black Brazilian women, if they wanted to be singers, the music industry in Brazil will automatically put them in the samba category, even if they wanted to sing another style of music. I talked about the importance of Whitney Houston, because can Brazil ever have a singer that ever reaches that much success? Of course, it probably wouldn't be possible because, Portuguese is not really a global language. Part of the reasons American singers sell so many records is because they appeal to a worldwide audience. So, but I'm just asking a question. Can a Black woman in Brazil ever be as popular in Brazil as Whitney Houston was in the United States? And up until now, I would say no. They always want to push Black Brazilians into singing samba. So this is what Tony Tornado was talking about in his interview. When he started making soul music, he started questioning, like, would you love Jesus Christ if he was Black? And it's like, oh, why don't you go back to singing samba? Everybody sings samba, right? The fifth point, again, is the influence of American soul music in Brazil. And the point is, as I said, in the late 60s, early 70s, and mid 70s, Black Brazilians were discovering Black American soul music. There's a scene in the Cidade de Deus, the City of God film, where they recreated one of these Black dances that was going on in Rio. Black Brazilians were starting to feel this pride in being Black, and a lot of them discovered this, through the introduction of soul music. And Tony Tornado was instrumental in the songs that he made. He didn't record samba. He recorded his own version of like Brazilian type of soul music. So even though he never became a big star, people remember him, the Brazilian James Brown. Some people will call him that. I met Tony Tornado in 2008 when I was in Sao Paulo. And I'll never forget because it was at the Troféu Raça Negra Awards. It's kind of like a Essence Awards, or better yet, NAACP type of image awards that they have in Sao Paulo for, prominent Black people that contributed to the struggle in Brazil. And when I met Tony Tornado, I had no idea this guy was so tall. I'm 6'4.5". Tony Tornado, I think he's 6'5". Because this guy was looking me dead in my eye. It was amazing. I'm standing in front of Tony Tornado, So then after that, I tried to get all the records that I could, and I started finding videos of Tony Tornado. Then I found out about his story, and I want to talk a little bit more about that now. So first, I want to overdub the interview that he did on a podcast. Like I said, maybe it's not even on a podcast. I can't say. I just discovered the interview, so I want to overdub it. It says, actor singer Tony Tornado, would you still love Jesus if he was a man of color? Now, this is what the single looks like. Se Jesus fosse homem de cor, Deus negro, which means if Jesus was a man of color, Black God. So let me overdub what Tony Tornado had to say in this interview. One time I was on stage singing a song called Deus Negro. My faith doesn't modify or change, but I cannot remain silent. My question needs an answer. Can someone give it to me? That's when the ish hit the fan.
Começava a porcaria aí. Você teria
Would you
por
have the
ele
same love
esse
for him if
mesmo
Jesus were a
amor,
man of
se
color?
Jesus fosse
Jesus,
um
a man of
homem
color? Are
de
you
cor.
crazy? Blah, blah, blah.
Jesus, um homem de
Then the
cor, ficou
church got in it.
maluco,
Then everybody got in on
Aí já
this.
entrou a igreja, aí já entrou todo mundo. O negão é
The black
comunista.
guy is a
Uma vez um
communist.
coronel
A
falou,
colonel
por
once
que
said,
preto
why?
comunista?
A
Nunca
black
vi, que
communist? I've
isso?
never seen it. What
Pô,
is
que
that?
negócio é esse?
Wow, what's
Por
up
que
with
tu não
that?
canta samba, cara? Canta samba, igual todo mundo e tal. Eu só
Why don't you
falava
sing
aquelas
samba,
coisas
man?
porque era
Sing samba like
oportunidade de
everyone
eu
else
poder
does, and
falar.
so on.
Que era quando eu
I
tinha
only said those
oportunidade de
things
falar,
because it
porque
was
tinha
an
um público
opportunity for me
maior.
to speak,
Não que
because it was
nós
when I had the opportunity to
exigíssemos que os
speak, because I
blacks
had a
fossem
larger
negros.
audience.
Mas o
Not
tipo
that
de
we
música que
demanded
nós
that the dances be
apresentávamos
black, but the
era
type
uma
of
música que
music
se
we presented
identificava
was
mais com a
music that
negrada. Eu não
identified
tenho o
more with
direito de
black
guardar isso
people.
para mim, entendeu?
I have
A
no
coisa que eu
right to keep this to
sabia,
myself,
que era
understand?
coisa mesmo
The thing
de,
that I
sabe, não
knew,
de
which was
peitar,
the thing of,
mas da
not
aceitação,
trying to start
da
something,
coisa
but of
de
acceptance, of
afirmação de
affirmation
negro,
as a black
nada de
person. None
mulato,
of this
nada de
mulatto, none of
cidadão
this
de
colored
cor,
citizen, none of this
nada de
mahon
marrom
boom boom.
bombom.
So Tony Tornado said a lot in this, in that little brief interview. He asked, would you love Jesus? Brazil is known as the biggest Catholic country in the world. And I talked about this in a previous video and a previous post. Actress Roberta Rodrygo said, my father didn't believe in a blue-eyed God. And in this video, or better, in this article, and then later in the video, I just talked about how Brazil, when it's presented Jesus Christ in stage productions or films or television series, they always present Jesus Christ as a white man. They've used various actors throughout the years to present Jesus Christ in the same way that the United States has done, or any other country around the world that wants to present a Jesus Christ. They're always going to use a man who has more Eurocentric features, right? So Tony Tornado asked this question way back in the 70s. Would you love Jesus Christ if he was a man of color? Now, a lot of people say, if you read what the Bible says, and it talks about how, Jesus had had hair of wool, and he had feet like bronze. So then the question would be, how could that be a European person with those type of attributes, right? So this is something that Tony Tornado also talked about in his song, and he got a lot of backlash at that time, which is what he's talking about here. Then we move on here to the point that I was just making. Sing samba like everybody else. That's what they're saying. You're a black man. Why you got to sing about this controversial stuff? Go back to singing samba just like everybody else does. All you black guys are supposed to sing samba. Be happy, right? Then this question of the affirmation of black people, the identity crisis that a lot of black Brazilians have. No, I'm not black. I'm a moreno. I'm a mestizo. I'm a pardo. I'm a mulatto. Anything but black. So Tony Tornado was saying back then, no, none of this mulatto, none of this pessoa de cor or person of color, none of this marrom bonbon. It's kind of like, a candy color or something like, chocolate. No. Call yourself black. Let's say negro. You are black. Identify with this. So this was Tony Tornado was back. He was all about way back in the early 70s, and he got into a lot of trouble for that. Right. So at this point, I want to conclude the preview to this video. I'm going to continue on for the long term, the long format video for those of you who want to stick around and come over to the other side. But for now, I'm going to end this video and request that you all come back and check out the full video.